Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Banjo-Kazooie. In the last part we finished off our first world, Mumbo's Mountain, and then opened up our second world, Trove Cove. Something worth noting about the structure of Gruntilda's lair. If you just beeline it, the distance between one note door and the next is usually pretty small, but the space that you open with a note door usually has at least two worlds around it you can access in some form or fashion. For instance, right here, we're actively technically at the entrance to what is the third overall world. But worth noting as well, while with Mumbo's Mountain, the painting that we used, I guess technically puzzle we finished to unlock Mumbo's Mountain was right next to the world in question, most of the other worlds in the game are a couple of rooms away from their painting at a minimum, sometimes quite the large distance. In fact, on that note of distance, come in this pipe like this to find our next cauldron shortcut. With that said, this does not connect to the first cauldron we found last time, Mumbo's token up here by the way, and instead connects to a cauldron we're not going to find until basically endgame, so it's just worth to grab that now so you actively have it for later, especially because it actively will come into play at that later time frame. The next note door in question is directly up here, but we need 180 notes. That means at minimum to move past this part of Gruntilda's lair, you need to get at least 60 notes in the first 3 worlds, which is pretty easily said and done, thankfully. Now there's a lake over here, and we actively want to go swim in it, because you might notice there is actively a cavern in the distance at the bottom of it. We don't need to access this for a good long while, but I'm going to take care of it now just to showcase what's here and grab at least one item from it, just to help speed things along otherwise. In here is a puzzle for a world, but we don't actively have the jigsaw platform to use it. This is the puzzle for Click Clock Wood, the final world in the game. So we know where that is now, thankfully. Oh, hi, Brentilda.
Ugly Grunty's nickname was Hog Breath. At which school? I also know that freshly burst boils is her favorite smell. If you think I'm rather soft, I'll be waiting in the loft. And the old hag's favorite color is dung brown.
I forget if I mentioned this last time, but just to say it outright again. If you notice I take a pause after every single Brentilda line, that's me taking the time to physically write it down in a notebook, so I have it on easy call for when I actively need that information down the line, should I need it at all. Also, I won't lie, behind the scenes, I was originally going to give Brentilda more of a traditionally soft, "Oh, hello, young bear" kind of voice. But then I thought in my head, it'd be funnier if Gruntilda didn't sound like that because she's an evil witch, but that's just what the family sounds like. Think the Bouviers from Simpsons without all the smoking. Over here, though, lies our second world, Trove Cove. Backflip onto the treasure chest to enter it. I adore the song here. It's one of my favorites in the game. Banjo-Kazooie's soundtrack is really catchy. Ahoy there! This be Trove Cove. There be 2 new moves for ye to find. We immediately want to go beyond the starting platform, though, to grab our blue Jinjo here, but be careful whenever you're in the water in Trove Cove, as the shark shows up and tries to chase you down. I think their name is Chompers. They do enough damage quickly enough where you really want to try and not be in the water as best you can here.
Hey, this Nipper's beach. You'll find nothing without Nipper's help. Help us then, crustacean brain. Cheeky bird need feathers clipping. Oh yeah? Just try it, shellhead.
Kazooie craves violence. So, Nipper is a very quick mini-boss of sorts.
Ah, you hurt Nipper. Makes me mad.
It's gonna do 2 or 3 strikes with its claws in a row and leaves itself open for a good mid-air attack with Kazooie. Do that 3 times and you are good.
Take that, big mouth bird. Oh, God.
And now I want to follow that hermit crab into a shell where our first Jiggy is going to lie. But Nipper kind of reminds me of something, though, and it's something that didn't really click with me until I played through Banjo-Tooie. Banjo-Kazooie largely lacks proper boss fights. There's a final boss, yes, and there's usually at least 1 Jiggy per world that's tied to a combat challenge of sorts, but it's seldom what I would consider a boss fight. Largely, they kind of come out kind of like what the one we just did was at large. And I won't lie, it's weird to look back at, but it's kind of refreshing because it means you're just kind of going through no nonsense to get through the worlds and actively grab all the items along the way. Meanwhile, some of the bosses in Banjo-Tooie, while they're impressive, are also annoying to either get to, unlock, or fight to begin with in some combination of those 3 statements. Our next destination here in the cove is the, I guess, marooned ship technically here in the middle of the cove. As not only are there a couple of notes here, but also that hippo's right there who's going to have our next Jiggy quest for us. But also, on top of the crow's nest, there is, in fact, a bottles move.
Wee, I'm a red feather. I help Kazooie fly when she knows how.
Gee, I wonder how we can learn how. But before we talk to Bottles there in that molehill, I want to come down here, get these notes, get a Mumbo token that's on the bottom part of the crow's nest platform. You need to climb up the main part of the mast to reach that. And then I want to talk to the hippo, as the Jiggy we get from that is fast enough where I might as well take care of it right now.
Ahoy there, I'm Captain Blubber, and I lost my treasure when my ship crashed.
Well, go find it then, Blubberguts.
Oh, but I can't swim. Can you help an old sea hippo?
Sure, we'll find it for you. So for Captain Blubber, we need to find 2 pieces of gold from the inside of his ship. However, we need to find 2 distinct entrances to get to it all. The first entrance is here on the main deck of the ship. You just need to ground pound into it to break it. And then the other is located at an underwater entrance you just need to swim up to. Worth getting the notes and Mumbo token while you're here as well. So at this point, I guess I might as well talk about my experience with Banjo-Kazooie.
Ahoy there, I be Blubber's treasure.
Thank you, I totally needed to know that. I've actively known about Banjo-Kazooie for pretty much my entire life. Because growing up, while we didn't have the game itself, we did have the Ocarina of Time strategy guide, and if memory serves, at least on our copy, one of the last pages in the game, if not the inverse print on the back cover, was an ad for this game. And I thought it looked cute as a kid, but we just never had it, and I didn't get it for several years. I didn't actively play this game until I was in high school. I think I was in maybe sophomore or junior year. And I'm not sure if it's because I had just played a lot more games by the time I got to this compared to some people who played it when they were very little, or by the time I had originally played it, my taste in platformers was a little more solidified in what I generally like to look for. But when I first played it, I thought it was neat, but I wasn't the most into it. Then I played Banjo-Tooie, like, the next week, and went, oh, no, Kazooie's great, actually. Because I saw the evil that this bear could, in fact, inflict upon my soul. I say that like Banjo-Tooie's bad. It's fine, but I don't vibe with a lot of its choices. I won't lie, though, the more I played it over the years since then, I've grown to appreciate Kazooie a lot more on the whole. In fact, I will say, when it comes to a level-per-level basis, I actually prefer a lot of this game's early and mid-game to, say, Mario 64's in comparison.
Me treasure! Thank you, me hearties. Take this reward. I'm off to spend!
Good on you, Hippo Man. Next up, let's go talk with Bottles at the top of the crow's nest to get our first move for Treasure Trove Cove. This is your big chance, Chicken Legs. It's time for you to fly.
At last, it better be easy, Bog Eyes.
Simple enough even for you, Bird Brain. Just stand on a flying disc and press A. Here's 25 red feathers to help you into the air. See ya. So flight in Banjo-Kazooie can only happen off of these flight pads. You press the A button, and then you're flying. To fly higher, you'll need some red feathers. Press A to use one, but remember that Beaky can only carry 50 of them. That pretty much summarizes it, and there's a Jiggy in this chest right here.
That golden treasure was for me. Now harder still, the game will be.
The thing with flight is not only do you need feathers to take off, you need feathers to gain altitude mid-flight. Like with swimming, you can hold down the R button to kind of enhance your turning in a way that can be pretty helpful. But largely, I tend to only fly in this game when the game requires it, as especially in mid to late game, while flight is still useful, especially with the power-up it can get later on. There's enough places where they place flight pads where you can just more easily platform around and grab items along the way by just jumping normally, that I prefer to do that. Plus, until we get a certain other power-up later down the line, it's also noticeably slow compared to just actively walking or talon trotting around. With that said, we're going to be using it pretty regularly throughout the game. Red feathers, like with notes, are placed all over the place. I don't think I've ever properly ran out of them compared to some of the other power-ups in the game that use a currency like that. But at the same time, if you see someone you're running low, make sure to grab them because one of the fastest ways to gain altitude is to mash the shit out of the A button mid-flight, and that'll eat your feathers up really quickly. That's why you'll actively see me kind of pace out my feathers as I'm trying to not just waste through my entire stock. Now, I don't know why, I always tend to do this particular cliff face relatively early in the level, despite the fact there's ways to get here more simply later on if you just go around the island in a specific circle. Which largely, you can kind of go around any world in this game in a circle, be it clockwise or counterclockwise, and pretty much take note of all the important landmarks where there's probably going to be a jiggy. Speaking of which, let's check out this bucket.
Be leaky, no good for water. Can Blair block hole with pebble?
I mean, I got eggs. Will that work? Sound indicates yes.
Leaky patched up, now empty water for Bear.
This gives us access to the Sand Castle, which is an important area, but not so much for the main campaign outside of the one jiggy that's actively here. Once we're in here, we're going to be faced with a pretty straightforward puzzle. And I think the crab here will even explain it.
Hey, Furball, you're looking wise. Solve my puzzle and win a prize.
The puzzle here is you need to spell the word that's on the wall, which is always Banjo-Kazooie. The other thing of note here outside the 4 notes that are in the water at the entrance is that if you want to input cheat codes in this game, which there are some that are officially told to you by the game and then others that you can just input at will, this is where you need to go to do them by using the ground pound on the various letters here in the game. With that said, you want to be careful with those because this is a game where if you put too many cheat codes in, Grunty will start sassing you, and eventually if you input too many, delete your save file. Future me is probably chiming in with the exact list of those cheat codes right now. There's some fun ones that allow you to say, just kind of skip worlds, get certain upgrades early and the like. But with how this game's progression feels, I don't really care to use them. The only ones I've technically used a lot in the past are the ones the game officially tells you. And even then, there's a specific reason for that. With that said, those cheats in question, which I don't input in this LP, you actively can't input until you actively learn them through the in-game means, so keep that in mind. My next goal is to get back on that cliff face and go to the one part that has something else important we haven't been to yet, which is going to be our next move from Bottles. And honestly, in a lot of regards, outside of the pirate ship and Nipper, this should be one of your earlier destinations, maybe even before the pirate ship for the flying molehill move from Bottles. Time to learn how to use these green pads. You'll reach new heights with my shock jump spring. Does Kazooie do it? My legs are tired. Don't worry, the turkey does all the work. Simply stand on a shock jump disc, then press and hold A. Nice going, you've learned all the Cove's new moves. So the way the shock jump works is that you hold the A button, you do a hop forward, and then when you land, Kazooie will charge up and make you do an even higher jump. When I first played the game, I stayed on the pad during the initial jump, but no, you can actively move and get some really good distance with this. The arc definitely takes some getting used to, I won't lie, but most times when you're actively using this, you can make the jump with the second jump from pretty much any distance that's close to your destination. And most of the times there's going to be items directly above these pads as well, even if it's largely just like feathers or eggs to help fill you out and all that jazz. There's also a Jinjo over here. 3 down, 2 to go. This platform just has notes and a crab for now, but there is actively something else that can happen here that's tied to an objective we haven't started interacting with yet. Like the other moves we've gotten thus far, whenever you get a new move, there's a jiggy tied to it pretty close by, and that's our destination here. We want to go to that little cave that was in the mountainside we saw on screen a moment ago, as that is where our jiggy is here. Also worth noting about the treasure chest enemies. For one thing, I think there's actively an anti-piracy measure tied to them that causes Banjo to get really slippery in some cases, so watch out for that if you're playing this via either a flash cart or the things like that nowadays, albeit this game is easy enough to access where you probably don't super need that. But worth noting about them is that since they're alive, they actively do have teeth that surround the edge of the interior of the treasure chests. So when you're jumping in there, you really want to make sure you do a backflip to try and get into them, because otherwise you're probably going to take a silly hit along the way. Heck, it's very easy for you to take a hit going in with a backflip all the same. Also, Banjo takes fall damage, and if you fall too far, it is an instant kill. In fact, towards endgame, one of the most likely ways you're going to die is falling and hitting the ground from a large distance. With that said, there's a very specific, I guess oversight is the word I should use for it, that I usually use to get around that, which I'll talk about when it becomes a little more relevant. I think I first do it in like the 5th or 6th world at large. Our next destination is at the top of the stone structure, which is going to be one of the longer jiggies here in Treasure Trove Cove, which kind of follows a trend that's visible across the game where even if what you do to get the jiggy kind of depends on the world in question, they follow certain trends in each world. Ground pound this. Follow the clues if you're looking for gold. We want to follow an arrow that popped up from where I just hit that X to find the next X, hit that, and continue moving from there to find a jiggy tied to that. Yeah, a lot of the trends at large here in Banjo-Kazooie when it comes to the jiggies. Usually there's one tied to the Jinjos, of course, but also there's a lot of things of like, this one will take you across the entire world to find specific switches to hit. There's usually one that's tied to reaching what's usually the highest point in the map and looking around from there. Where there's a Mumbo hut, there's usually one tied to a transformation from there, but that's not in every world. There's usually one tied to some sort of combat challenge, one tied to collecting something for someone else, things like that. They actively do a really good job of varying it up at the same time between worlds to make it feel really fresh every time. While I make my way up the top of this next stone structure we're next to, which there's going to be a lot of notes on the stairway on the way up to, I figure it's about time we start talking about this game's dev team, which is largely Rareware, who I mentioned back in part 1, we largely know them probably in my specific circles for the Donkey Kong Country games. So they made a lot of games before that, specifically as developers for publishers like LGN and the like back on the NES. They did Battletoads, they did the Nightmare on Elm Street game, things like that. But in specific, the game's project lead and lead game designer is Greg Males, who started on Solar Jet Manhunt for the Golden Warp Ship on the NES as a critiquer, which I'm assuming means they were just a director or a QA tester. They were an uncredited designer for Battletoads. They were on game design for Battletoads in the arcade, DKC, DKC2 they were a producer, DKC3 they were in special thanks. But after Banjo-Kazooie, they were on support team for DK64, back in the head team for Banjo-Tooie. Additional game design for Conker's Bad Fur Day, special thanks in Star Fox Adventures. Post Microsoft purchase of Rare, though, Saberwolf, they were an original concept designer for it. Grabbed by the Ghoulies, they were a game designer. Jetpack Refueled, they were on Rare management. Viva Pinata on the 360 Windows, they were a designer. But after that, largely a lot of Rare's output became ports, although they were on the Deft Ideas and vehicle gluing parts, so they were still pretty involved in the development of Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. After Connect Sports, of all things, which they were also a designer for, their most recent credits are as part of the original Rare team for Rare Replay. They're a designer on Sea of Thieves to this day, and they're in the special thanks for the 2020 Battletoads game. Now that we got the jiggy in the water pool up here, I want to fall down this specific corner and beak bomb, so I can try and get underwater fast enough to grab this honeycomb piece without Snapper grabbing a chunk of me, but he just did. Thankfully, it's only one hit, but that said, he's still pretty relentless after that. The honeycombs in this specific stage are where they start getting a little devious pretty quickly with them. As that one's nestled in a corner, you're not really likely to look in unless you know it's going to be there. And the other honeycomb piece is easier to spot in other versions of the game because the N64 version's draw distance prevents it from being rendered until you're already next to it, almost. Which is definitely one of the larger issues in the N64 release, because while these worlds are honestly for the N64 really good looking and really detailed, the 2D assets, even a lot of the 3D stuff, you really need to get pretty close for it to render in, which makes sense for the technical aspects of the N64, but for what's meant to be a game where you collect all the things, it's definitely a little jarring how close you need to get for some notes and the like to really pop up. Also, you may have just noticed there was a rock in the water with a sign on it. That's technically just aesthetics for now, but there is actively something tied to that we'll talk about at the very end of the LP. Where that crab was earlier, there's now another X, so we can ground pound that and get our next hint. You'll never find me now. Gee, I wonder, is it potentially at the largest X in the world? Ow, crab! Upon ground pounding this, the chest shows up, attack it once, and the Jiggy within is yours. Although not for nothing, it does move pretty quickly. Alright, at this point, only 2 Jiggies remain, 1 honeycomb piece remains, and the witch switch to spawn a Jiggy in Gruntilda's lair remains, so let's start working towards those. Also, Mumbo token right there. Let's start off with the honeycomb piece, which is really close by. Let's go out here. Oh, hey, look, a box. Oh, hey, there's the honeycomb. Yeah, that box, unless you're, like, on the corner over near the stone structure on the, like, northeastern side of the island, it doesn't really spawn in that, obviously, and... yeah, that specific honeycomb piece took me a while to find my first playthrough. Moments like that I'm not a big fan of in the game, but I can't exactly blame them too hard on it because of just the technical limitations of the console. But at the same time, they really could have kept those in mind and maybe moved it a bit closer to the beach so you can maybe know there's potentially something out there from a closer distance, but oh well. So, one Jiggy that's left here in Trove Cove is at the highest peak of the mountain, and in order to get that, we need to take this flight pad and then go to that staircase on the right rather than towards where the treasure chest enemy was on the left that had a Jiggy earlier. With that said, the rest of the notes, the witch switch, as well as the final Jinjo are all in this direction as well, hence why I've played this world in the order I have. There is always a very big sense of anxiety when I'm above like 85 notes in any given world in this game though. Because A, if I die, that's a lot to go recollect. But also I start reaching the point of, if I grab what I know to be the last note and I still have some notes left to find. Because that means I missed something. And even in the smaller worlds in this game, the notes are spread apart across the world well enough where there's enough places to check that I start getting scared. It's definitely less anxiety-inducing in the early game than it is by mid-game, but that's just because of the general scale increase as we go through it. Also, something I love that this game does, they actively will swap the music around a little bit as you progress through the stage and get to different destinations. Like, it's very quiet and windy up here near the top where a lighthouse lies. But even then, like, there's a different version of every given world theme when you're underwater, when you're maybe inside a specific destination, and like, there's like 3 to 6 variants of any given world theme in this game, and they're all annoyingly catchy, partially because the composer was really good at doing so. I guess I might as well talk about that. The composer for this game is Grant Kirkhope, who started back in '96 on Killer Instinct 2 and Donkey Kong Land 2 working on the music team. But their first, like, full soundtrack credit, I believe, was GoldenEye. Then they did the live guitar for Blast Chord. They did the music for this. I think they did the same for DK64. Banjo-Tooie, Perfect Dark. I think they were still a musician for Star Fox Adventures. Grabbed by the Ghoulies, same deal. Viva Pinata. Post-Microsoft purchase, they've worked on things like Yaiba Ninja Gaiden Z, oh god, the Castle of Illusion remake, Yooka-Laylee they were a composer for, guest composer for Hat in Time, Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle, as well as its sequel I believe they did a composition for as well, and they also did some music for Up Smash Ultimate, largely remixing some very specific songs from this game because, well, you know. And their most recent credit is that they did the main theme song for Paperclay. So this is the total screen. You can view it at any time in the pause screen. You can take a look at how many notes, jiggies, honeycombs, and the like you've had in any given world, as well as how long you've been in any given world. And largely, if you know the game well enough like I do, you could probably finish any given world in less than a half hour until about the end game, or maybe the last 2 worlds will extend that time pretty noticeably. With that said, because I got the jiggies up there and I used the witch switch and I have all the honeycombs, we're done here in Trove Cove, so we're good to leave. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 4, we're going to go grab the jiggy that spawned in Gruntilda's lair and head on to our next world. See you guys then.